I will never forget the look on Victoria's face when the police officer handed me that court order. Her eyes, the same eyes I'd soothed to sleep so many nights when she was little, now looked at me cold, distant, as if I were a stranger. As if the 32 years of sacrifice, love, and dedication meant absolutely nothing. My name is Isabella Morales. I'm 68 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I lived in the house I built with my late husband, Carlos. The house where I raised my only daughter. The house I naively put in her name, believing I was securing her future. The house she threw me out of with just 2 bags of belongings and my old dog, Lucky. But there was something Victoria didn't know, a detail that would change everything. Let me tell you how I got here. It all started 15 months ago. I was sitting in the living room, looking at old photographs of Carlos. It had already been 5 years since cancer took him, but his absence still hurt like the first day. Victoria came to visit me that Sunday, as she used to do every couple of weeks. She sat next to me and noticed the tears I was trying to hide. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked, taking my hand in hers. I smiled at her, wiping my cheeks. "Just remembering your father, my love. You know these days are always hard." Victoria nodded and hugged me. Then, as if she had been thinking about it for a long time, she looked at me seriously. "Mom, I've been worried about you. You live all alone in this big house. What if you fall? What if something happens and nobody knows?" Her concern touched me. Since Carlos passed away, she had been my rock, my support, even though she lived in her own apartment across town. "I'm fine, honey. I have Lucky. I have the neighbors who come over for coffee every afternoon. You don't have to worry so much." Victoria shook her head, her expression growing more serious. "It's not just that, Mom. This house needs a lot of maintenance. The roof needs repairs. The pipes are old. If something major breaks, what then? Are you going to pay for it with your Social Security check?" I couldn't deny she was right. The house was over 30 years old, and every winter new leaks would appear. Carlos had always handled the repairs, but since his death, everything had become more complicated. My pension barely covered the basic necessities, and the money from Carlos's life insurance policy had been used up paying for his medical treatments. "I've been thinking about something," Victoria continued. "What if you put the house in my name? That way I could take care of all the expenses, the repairs, the property taxes. You could keep living here, of course. Nothing would change in your day-to-day life except that I'd handle everything else." I looked at her, surprised. I didn't expect that proposal. "But honey, this house is your inheritance. It'll be yours anyway when I'm gone." "Exactly, Mom. But if we wait, you'll have to go through all the probate paperwork. The inheritance taxes are higher. Besides, if we do it now, I can start investing in improving the house. Think about it. A new roof, pipes that don't leak, maybe even that central heating system you always wanted." I had to admit, the offer sounded tempting. The winters were getting harder on me with my arthritis getting worse, and the idea of not having to worry about home maintenance was a relief. "I don't know, Victoria. This house is all I have." "Mom," she said, taking my hands in hers, "trust me, it's just a legal formality. You'll keep living here as long as you want. I promise." Her eyes shone with a sincerity that disarmed me. This was my Victoria, the little girl I had raised with so much love, the woman in whom I had placed all my hopes. How could I not trust her? "All right," I finally agreed. "I'll talk to a lawyer." Victoria smiled widely and hugged me. "Don't you worry about a thing, Mom. I'll take care of all the paperwork. I know an excellent notary." And so it began. Over the next few weeks, Victoria took care of every detail. She brought me documents to sign. She explained each step of the process. Or at least that's what I thought. I signed so many papers that honestly I lost track. I trusted my daughter blindly. A month later, Victoria gave me the news. The house was officially in her name. We celebrated with a special dinner, and she made a toast to a secure future. I remember feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. My daughter would take care of everything, and I could live peacefully. The first few weeks after the transfer, everything seemed normal. Victoria came to visit even more frequently than before. She brought contractors to fix the roof, just as she had promised. She replaced the pipes in the main bathroom. She even hired a landscaper to get the backyard in order. It was then that I met Derek. Victoria brought him to dinner one Friday. Tall, blonde, with a perfect smile and an impeccable suit. At first glance, he seemed like the ideal son-in-law. "Derek is a real estate investor," Victoria explained as he poured the wine they had brought. "We met at a finance conference 3 months ago." I remember thinking it was strange that Victoria had never mentioned him before, but the way they looked at each other made me think it was recent and serious. "A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Morales," Derek said, shaking my hand firmly. "Victoria has told me so much about you. She says you're the strongest woman she knows. His words flattered me, but there was something in his eyes that unsettled me, a calculated coldness that contrasted with his perfect smile. I tried to ignore the feeling, blaming it on my motherly jealousy. After all, Victoria seemed happy, and that was all that mattered. Derek started becoming a part of our lives quickly. He came with Victoria almost every Sunday. He was charming, attentive, always bringing small gifts, chocolates, flowers, once even a new collar for Lucky. And yet, something inside me remained on alert whenever he was near. It was during one of those Sunday visits that Victoria told me the news. They were engaged. She showed me a ring with a diamond so large it looked fake. They had only been dating for 4 months. "Don't you think it's a little soon, honey?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Victoria looked at me with irritation. "Mom, when you know you found the right person, you know. Your father and you got married after only 6 months, remember?" It was true, but times were different. Carlos and I were young, almost naive. Victoria was 32 with a successful career as an accountant. I expected her to be more cautious. "I just want to make sure you know what you're doing," I insisted. Derek intervened then with that smile that never reached his eyes. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Morales. It's natural to want to protect your daughter, but I promise you, my intentions are serious. I love Victoria and I want to build a future with her." I nodded, not knowing what else to say. Victoria seemed so in love, so happy. Who was I to ruin that moment? The wedding was 2 months later. A small ceremony in a beautiful garden. Victoria was radiant in her white dress, and I cried as expected. Part of me cried with joy, seeing my daughter so happy. Another part, one I tried to ignore, cried from a sense of loss I couldn't explain. After the wedding, Victoria's visits became less frequent. She always had an excuse: work, social commitments with Derek, exhaustion. From visiting every 2 weeks, it went to once a month, then every 6 weeks. When I called, Derek often answered, telling me Victoria was busy and that he'd pass on the message. My calls to Victoria directly often went unanswered. One afternoon, about 8 months after the wedding, Victoria called me. Her voice was strained, almost cold. "Mom, Derek and I need to talk to you. Can you come over to our apartment this evening?" My heart sank. This was unusual. She always came to my house. "Of course, honeys. Is everything all right?" "We'll explain everything when you get here," she said, and then hung up. That evening, I arrived at their luxurious penthouse apartment. Derek opened the door, his usual perfect smile in place, but his eyes were as cold as ever. Victoria was sitting on the sofa, looking pale and nervous. "Mom, we have something important to tell you," Victoria began, avoiding my gaze. "Derek and I are expecting a baby." My breath caught in my throat. "A grandchild." My heart swelled with joy. "Oh, Victoria, that's wonderful news. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I tried to hug her, but she stiffened. "Mom, we also have something else to discuss," Derek interjected, his voice devoid of emotion. "With the baby coming, we need more space. This apartment is too small. We've decided to move into your house." I stared at them, completely stunned. "My house? What do you mean, your house? I live there." Victoria finally looked at me, her eyes hard. "Mom, the house is legally in my name. We need it. You can find somewhere smaller, more suitable for your age." The words hit me like a physical blow. "But you promised. You said I could live there as long as I wanted." My voice trembled. Derek stepped forward, his smile gone. "Promises are not legally binding, Mrs. Morales. The deed is clear. Victoria Bennett is the sole owner. We're being generous by giving you 2 weeks to find a new place." 2 weeks? My world was crumbling. I looked at Victoria, searching for the daughter I knew, the one who loved me. "Victoria, how can you do this? This is my home. Your father and I built it with our own hands." She stood up, her face a mask of indifference. "Mom, please don't make this difficult. It's for the best. We need to start our family in a proper home." I left their apartment that night in a daze, the joy of a grandchild replaced by a crushing sense of betrayal. The next 2 weeks were a blur of frantic phone calls and desperate pleas. I called Victoria repeatedly, but she never answered. Derek would occasionally pick up, his voice always calm, always firm. "Mrs. Morales, the decision has been made. Please respect Victoria's wishes." I tried to explain my situation to friends, to neighbors, but they just shook their heads, unable to believe what they were hearing. My savings were minimal, barely enough for a few months' rent in a small apartment. I had no idea where I would go, what I would do. Lucky, sensing my distress, stayed glued to my side, his old head resting on my lap. On the last day of the 2 weeks, a letter arrived. It was from Victoria's lawyer, an eviction notice. They were taking me to court. The final hearing was set for 3 days later. I went, of course, a nervous wreck. Victoria and Derek were there, sitting on the opposite side of the courtroom, looking completely composed. Their lawyer presented the deed, clearly showing Victoria as the owner. My own attempts to explain the verbal agreement, the promise, were dismissed as irrelevant. The judge, a stern-faced woman, listened gently, but her verdict was swift. The property was legally Victoria's. I had 48 hours to vacate. That's when the police officer handed me the court order. I looked at Victoria, hoping for a flicker of remorse, a hint of the daughter I once knew. But there was nothing, just that cold, distant stare. I walked out of that courtroom feeling completely hollowed out. 48 hours. 48 hours to pack up 30 years of my life. I spent the next 2 days in a fog, mechanically sorting through my belongings, deciding what could fit into 2 suitcases, what had to be left behind. Each item I touched brought back a flood of memories. Carlos's favorite armchair, the small ceramic bird Victoria had made in kindergarten, the old piano where we used to sing Christmas carols. They were all just things I told myself, but they were also the tangible remnants of a life, a family, a love that now seemed entirely gone. The house, the memories it held, were more important than me. At dawn, I put the last few things in my suitcase. A taxi was waiting to take me to the Greyhound station. I paused for a moment at the front door, allowing myself one last look. "Come on, Lucky," I said, my voice barely recognizable as my own. "It's time to go." Just as I was closing the door, I saw Victoria's car pull up. She and Derek were coming to make sure I really left, I suppose. I saw my daughter get out of the car, impeccably dressed as always. Our eyes met for a moment. I thought that maybe at the last minute she would reconsider, that the daughter I had raised with so much love would come back to me. But she simply pulled out her phone and started talking to someone, turning her back on me. Derek watched me from the car with that cold smile I now understood so well. The taxi driver put my 2 suitcases in the trunk. I helped Lucky get into the back seat. That was it. 30 years of my life reduced to 2 suitcases and an old dog. "Where to, Ma?" the driver asked. "The bus station," I replied without looking back. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. As the taxi pulled away, I remembered the words of Victoria's lawyer. "The property is registered in the name of Victoria Bennett. She has filed an eviction lawsuit alleging that you are illegally occupying her property." And then I remembered something else. Something Victoria and Derek didn't know. Something that would change everything. The journey to Elena's house was long and silent. Lucky slept on my lap, oblivious to the storm of emotions consuming me. Rage, pain, disappointment, but above all, a determination I hadn't felt in a long time. Because there was something Victoria and Derek didn't know, something that had been forgotten in the whirlwind of events. When I arrived at Elena's house, she was waiting for me at the door. She hugged me tight without asking any questions and led me inside. Her house was small but cozy, so different from the one I had just lost. She set me up in her guest room and let me rest. That night, after a dinner I barely touched, I told her everything. How Victoria had convinced me to put the house in her name. How she had changed after meeting Derek, the court order, the 48 hours, the humiliation of being thrown out of my own home. Elena listened in silence, her expression shifting from disbelief to outrage. "Isabella," she said finally, "do you remember when you decided to put this house in Victoria's name? Do you remember that Carlos had a lawyer friend, Ernesto Vega?" I nodded slowly. Ernesto had been Carlos's friend since college. He had been at our wedding, at Victoria's baptism. After Carlos died, he had come to visit me several times, offering his help with legal matters. "You talked to him before you signed anything, right?" Elena pressed. "Yes," I remembered suddenly. "Ernesto told me not to sign anything without him reviewing it, and then Victoria brought the papers. And I stopped, remembering something else. Ernesto had insisted on reviewing the documents before I signed. I had called him to tell him about Victoria's proposal. He had warned me to be careful, to include clauses that would protect me. Ernesto added something to the documents," I said slowly, the memories flooding back. "A clause, the right of a life estate," Elena completed, smiling for the first time that night. "I remember because Carlos and I talked about it when he was sick. Ernesto recommended that if you ever transferred the property to Victoria, you should secure your right to live there until your death." I sat in silence, processing the information. Was it possible? There was a clause in the documents that gave me the right to live in the house regardless of who the owner was. "But what about the court order?" I began. "Victoria and that husband of hers probably don't know anything about that clause," Elena said. "I bet neither of them bothered to read the original documents. And if the lawyer they hired didn't do his job correctly..." A small flame of hope ignited within me. I need to call Ernesto. Elena looked at her watch. It's late, but first thing tomorrow morning we'll call him. You rest now. Tomorrow is a new day. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. The next morning, Elena woke me with coffee and news. She had gotten a hold of Ernesto and briefly told him the situation. He was expecting us at his office at 10. We arrived on time. Ernesto, now with more gray hair but the same kind smile I remembered, greeted us with a hug. Isabella, I am so sorry about all of this, he said, motioning for us to sit. Elena gave me some details, but I need you to tell me exactly what happened. For the next hour, I recounted everything. Victoria's proposal, the documents I signed, the wedding to Derek, the changes in her behavior, and finally the eviction order. Ernesto took notes, his expression growing more and more grim. When I finished, he took off his glasses and looked at me directly. Isabella, do you remember I insisted on reviewing all the documents before you signed them? I nodded. Yes. You came to the house, and we went over them together. Exactly. And I added a specific clause, a life estate. It means that even though the property is in Victoria's name, you have the legal right to live there until your death. It's a right that cannot be revoked, not even by the property owner. So, the court order. It's invalid completely, Ernesto affirmed. The judge who issued it likely had no knowledge of this clause. Victoria and her lawyer must have only presented the title deed without mentioning the life estate. That's fraud upon the court. A mix of relief and rage washed over me. Can I get my house back? You not only can, Isabella, you have the indisputable legal right to live there. We will file a countersuit immediately, presenting the original deed with the life estate clause. We will also report Victoria and her lawyer for fraud upon the court. My mind reeled. Fraud? My own daughter committing fraud? What will happen to Victoria? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ernesto sighed. At best, she'll face serious legal repercussions, possibly even disbarment for her lawyer. At worst, if intent to defraud can be proven, there could be criminal charges. The thought of Victoria facing criminal charges twisted my stomach. Even after everything, she was still my daughter. Is there any way to avoid that? I asked. Ernesto considered for a moment. We can try to negotiate. If Victoria agrees to return the house to your name and compensates you for your distress, we might be able to avoid pressing the fraud charges. But it will be entirely up to you. Over the next few days, Ernesto worked quickly. He filed the countersuit and sent a demand letter to Victoria's lawyer, outlining the life estate clause and the potential for fraud charges. The response was immediate and panicked. Victoria's lawyer called Ernesto, trying to understand how they could have missed such a crucial detail. Derek, it turned out, had pushed Victoria to use a cheap, inexperienced lawyer he knew, someone who hadn't done their due diligence. Victoria and Derek had never read the original documents themselves, only the simplified summaries their lawyer provided. They had been so focused on seizing the house that they overlooked the very thing that protected me. A week later, I was back in Ernesto's office. Victoria and Derek were there, looking disheveled and terrified. Victoria's face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. Derek, for the first time, didn't have his perfect smile. He looked defeated. Mrs. Morales, Victoria's lawyer began, his voice strained. My clients are prepared to offer a full apology and return the property to your name immediately. They are also willing to offer financial compensation for your emotional distress and any expenses incurred. I looked at Victoria. Her eyes met mine, filled with shame and regret. Mom, I am so sorry, she choked out, tears streaming down her face. I don't know what I was thinking. Derek, he convinced me. He said it was the only way to secure our future, to build a life for our baby. My heart ached at her words. The baby. The lie that had been used to manipulate me. There is no baby, is there, Victoria? I asked softly. She flinched, looking down. No, Mom, there isn't. It was Derek's idea. He thought it would make you feel guilty if you resisted. The cruelty of it, using the idea of a grandchild against me, was almost unbearable. But seeing her so broken, so remorseful, a different kind of pain washed over me. The pain of seeing my daughter lost, manipulated. Ernesto stepped in. Isabella, we have a strong case. We can pursue this further, or we can accept their offer. I looked at Victoria, then at Derek, who was avoiding my gaze. I want my house back, I said firmly, and I want Victoria to understand the gravity of what she did. Derek finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Mrs. Morales, I truly apologize. I misled Victoria. I was greedy. I saw an opportunity and I exploited it. Please, don't press charges. It will ruin Victoria's career, our lives. I looked at him, then back at my daughter. Victoria, if you truly want to make amends, you will return the house to me, and you will understand that trust, once broken, is not easily rebuilt. As for you, Derek, I want you out of my daughter's life. You have poisoned her heart and mind. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. The house was swiftly transferred back into my name. Victoria, humbled and remorseful, agreed to every condition. Derek, facing the threat of legal action and the loss of his wife's inheritance, disappeared. He left Victoria a note saying he needed to sort out his life. Victoria, devastated but also strangely relieved, filed for divorce. The road to reconciliation with Victoria was long and arduous. She moved back to her apartment but came to visit regularly, not out of obligation, but by choice. Slowly, we rebuilt our trust. 1 year after my return, we were sitting on the back porch, looking at the garden we had replanted together, restoring it to its former glory. Lucky was dozing at our feet, a very old but happy dog now. "Do you know what hurt the most?" I asked Victoria, feeling we could finally talk about it without the pain being unbearable. She looked at me, waiting. "It wasn't losing the house, it was losing you, seeing who you had become." Victoria nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know, and that's what I'll never completely forgive myself for. Not the court order, not the lies, but betraying everything you taught me about love, family, and integrity." I took her hand. "But you came back. You chose the right path in the end. Thanks to you," she said, "to your strength, your dignity, to that one detail we forgot to check in the documents." I smiled, remembering the look on Victoria's face when she found out I had a legal right to stay in the house. "The life estate, your father's foresight through Ernesto. Dad was always looking out for us, even after he was gone," Victoria murmured. "Yes," I agreed, looking at the sky as it began to turn orange. "Always." That evening, after Victoria left, I stayed a while longer on the porch with Lucky. The house was mine again, legally and in every way that mattered. My daughter had come back to me, not as the person manipulated by Derek, but as the Victoria I had raised. Life had taken a lot from me. Carlos, too soon, almost my home, and temporarily my daughter. But it had also given me so much back. My dignity, my home, my rebuilt family, and it had taught me an invaluable lesson, that even in the darkest moments, when it seems like you've lost everything, there is always one detail, small but crucial, that can change everything. In my case, it was a legal clause that Derek and Victoria overlooked. But it was also my inner strength, the strength I didn't know I had until I was forced to use it. Today, sitting on the porch of the house I almost lost, with the daughter I almost lost, and the dog that never left my side, I am at peace. This is my house, my home, and no one will ever take it from me.